This is a mission-focused life with Tim Olafson, co-founder and executive director of Another Child Foundation. Up next, Tim will speak with this week's special guest, offering special insights on how you can live a mission-focused life.
As this week's guest, we have Dr. Kit Ford. She is the founder of Argos House in Davenport, Iowa, and she's also the executive director there. Kit was also one of the 5 people in the country who was given the award, the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Award for Outstanding Public Service Benefiting Local Communities. That's a mouthful, but that's quite an award, quite a recognition. And we'd just like to welcome her to the show today. Welcome, Kit.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's good to be here.
It is good to have you here. And so we're kind of reversing the tables because when we first met, actually, you were interviewing me on a local radio or local TV show. I don't really remember a whole lot about that, but I know I was scared to death, and you did an awesome job leading me.
Oh, you did a great job
and I'm
too.
going to try to hopefully do the same thing with you today. So anyway, so we're just going to jump right in. But before we get to all the wonderful work that you're doing, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your family, where your situation is today?
Okay, yeah. Well, we're Argos House. We are a healing house for women in Davenport, Iowa. We provide free holistic services for women healing from violence and abuse, different types of therapeutic services, but we're also a bath and body product company, as you can see in the back here. And so we're very purposeful about all of our products being survivor made, and very purposeful about making the best quality products that we can. Argos House is named after my grandma Agro, who was also a survivor of violence and domestic violence specifically. I'm from a small town in North Carolina. But, you know, my grandmother, in the midst of the reality of abuse in her marriage, she was also a local deacon in the church. And so she's the reason I believe in God, the reason I believe in love. I know if there was a safe place like Argos House for her back then, she may not have been in that abusive situation most of her adult life, or most of her life, because she married at the age of 14. But I also know that she would love to be a part of a ministry like this. So I'm grateful that we're able to do something in her name, like Argos House.
Yes, it's exciting. Yeah, tell us a little bit about your family. I know you're married to a pastor, and you actually have that background yourself. So tell us a little bit more about you and your family.
Right. Yeah. So, So my husband is a pastor. His name is Reverend Dwight Ford. He leads Project Now, which is a organization in the Quad Cities that's committed to assisting people who are in impoverished situations. So they help with housing, with Head Start programming. They assist with, different types of bills and electrical bills and things. And he also leads a church called Grace City Church here in the Quad Cities. You know, the church has been a huge part of the reason Argos House exists. The church assisted us, believed in us before anyone else believed in us. It was God, and then it was the church. Grace City Church that helped us get our first mortgage here. We were able to pay off the mortgage within 2 years, but they were the ones that put it properly on the line so that we could be in this property. Yeah. And Grace City is also the one that's assisting us as we transition to move into our first industrial kitchen and larger communal space, prayerfully this summer. And so, my background is in violence prevention, community development. I've served in different countries around the world. Working with gender-based violence issues, working in HIV and AIDS programming, also in special education programming, have done that work through Teach for America, the Peace Corps, and other programs. In my mid-20s, years ago, I accepted my call to ministry. So I went to seminary in Berkeley and then also in Evanston. Much of the work that I've done has been focused on trauma and healing. When I was a Peace Corps volunteer, I became a survivor of an extremely violent sexual assault. And so during that time, part of my own healing journey was figuring out what would help me in my healing journey and moving forward in the midst of post-traumatic stress disorder and other things, post-trauma. But in doing that research for myself, I gained this commitment um, to help other women and figuring out what would help them in their healing and their own uniqueness. And so that's why we have Argos House. We have a variety of different services so that each woman can figure out what works for them. Is it therapeutic animal support? Is it, support groups? Is it one-on-one counseling? Is it art therapy? Is it literally making bath bombs in the kitchen? Having the safe space to lament, but also to create and also to laugh, and so, that's what Argos House is about. And for me, the ministry, I find that when people are committed to different types of ministry, oftentimes it has a personal connection. Either it's something that has impacted them, some type of experience that they had with another person, be it a stranger or someone that they love. But in some way, we had a personal experience with some issue where we really want to be involved and commit our life to serving in that way, not just for a day, but as part of our lifestyle and way of giving back to the world, but also in helping to build up the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whenever someone's overcoming trauma, like in which the ladies and women that you help, community is going to play a huge part of that. But there's also an individual type of healing too. But tell us how the community really is so important to bring people together and heal together. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I think that oftentimes when people are healing from trauma, so many emotions can happen. There's fear, there's grief, there's self-blame. There's so many different emotions that can happen. But when you find a safe space where you are believed, where your voice is validated, where you are affirmed, where you realize that you're not alone and you don't have to suffer in silence, it becomes an integral part of, being able to remember and mourn what you've lost, but also being able to reconnect with those things that give you joy because you have a community to do it with. You don't have to do it alone. And so I find for us, in the midst of COVID-19, many of our services have become virtual, but every day before COVID-19 and prayerfully post COVID-19, as we roll these vaccines out, there are women and children that are coming in and out that are connecting with each other. I find that we have a community, but they're communities within communities where women, because of their personalities, because of their social location, they just gravitate towards each other. And so community is key because you realize that you don't have to suffer in silence. You're not alone, and you're affirmed in a way where you're literally and metaphorically hand in hand with other people who understand what you've been through because they've experienced the reality of trauma and violence as well.
Yeah. So as the pandemic kind of subsides and people start re-entering into community again, do you see the needs for your services increasing, unfortunately, or because I know there's probably some things that are going on that maybe are not being brought to light. So do you suspect there's going to be an increased need for your services as we come back normal?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, there's always for a long time been a need for services for survivors of domestic violence, sex trafficking, rape, incest, molestation. I find that, I don't know the specific statistics, but, nationally, the reality of domestic violence has gone up during the pandemic just because people are having to stay in their homes, people are working from home, children have been home, job loss, addiction, depression, all of these different things have impacted the numbers of increased domestic violence during the pandemic. And so will numbers increase post-pandemic? I'm not sure. I know that numbers have increased during the pandemic as it relates to domestic violence because of those factors.
Yeah. So I love interviewing people, and I knew when we started to do this podcast, I wanted to have you on because you just have this great energy, and you have this. You can impact people. You just have that personality to where people are drawn to you, and I know you can affect people, and I know that excites you to be able to influence people and to be able to help them move past their situations. So what excites you every day? Is there a story that you can tell that kind of that motivational fact that kind of inspires you?
What inspires me? What excites me? No, I mean my kids make me smile daily. I have very small children. They're 4 and 5. They're sweet, very sweet kids. But I think the work, our first survivor employee, Allie, sweet as pie, she doesn't mind if I share a story. She has been journeying with us for 3 years. She came literally eye swollen because of abuse, fleeing abuse, and she was in another state at the time. Had lost custody of her children and other things. And I mean, it was a continual back and forth and so many power dynamics as it relates to her ex-husband. But now 3 years later, she has equal custody of her children. She's gainfully employed. I hated to see her leave because she was an amazing soap maker that she's doing. I know, I'm like, oh, come back, you're amazing. But she, is doing well, has several healthy relationships, relationships with her family and her children. And she's just doing really, really well, mind, body, and spirit. And so when you see someone who literally comes, with abused mind, body, and spirit to a place where they're in such a dark place, to where they have been able to find their light, their joy, to the point where they're mentoring other women and giving back. It's really, it lets me know that the work is not in vain. It lets me know that we have to continue with this work as a community. Every single day, we have some type of connection with a woman survivor. I find that volunteers who assist with the house as well, even though they're not here for services, they're also here oftentimes because they've had some type of personal experience. So to know that even in the midst of COVID-19, that Argos House can still be a safe place for people, to come and to be. And I also think for me, because I have my own personal story of trauma and healing and experience with trauma and healing, there's the scripture, and theologically we could wrestle with these scriptures. 2 Timothy 2:12, talks about, if you suffer with me, you will reign with me. There's scriptures throughout the Bible that talk about, suffering not being in vain, and all of these different things. And so it lets me know that even my own suffering was not just a dark place. Part of that, and part of experiencing that, was so that I could help other women in leading and starting a place like Argos House. Because I've experienced certain pain from being in communication and relationship with women in my family, and because of my own suffering from being a trauma survivor and a survivor of an extremely violent sexual assault, and even going through a trial where my assaulter, received 46 years in prison. Because I've experienced those things, I'm able to understand really what the women are going through, and work to be patient and journey, with them every step of the way. And a lot of times these situations, it's not something that, it's not like you say, oh, I'm on this journey of healing, everything's going to be great as soon as I wake up in the morning. Oftentimes the healing journey, things that we go through as trauma survivors, it's a lifetime of journeying. It's a lifetime of healing. And so, we journey with each other and work to be patient with each other, one day at a time.
Yeah. The thing as I've done these interviews with people like yourself, the people who have overcome situations in their past, there's usually a moment, either a defining moment, but even more regularly, there's somebody who invested time into them to help them overcome. Did you have anything like that? Did you have a person that entered your life that was kind of the person that helped you, go to that next level and really deal with the issues that you had?
hmm 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 yeah, I mean, I think that I have a praying family because so many of the people in my family are ministers. And so I do think that, I mean, my mom always says the prayers of the righteous availeth much. And I do think that there is something to that, the power of prayer and being in community, even if that community is family. I also had, I hadn't talked to her in a long time. But when I first was medically evacuated from the island that I was serving, hands cut up, had to have surgeries, hadn't slept for days because I didn't realize what was happening to me was post-traumatic stress disorder. And so,
Yeah.
I had this long journey of darkness. But the first week I was back, I was put in touch with a counselor, and she was a therapist. And her name, she I won't say her name, but she was amazing, and she journeyed with me for years. Even when I wasn't in Chapel Hill, she literally, I was still in graduate school. I had accepted my call to ministry and was moving forward in seminary. She literally would talk to me every, regardless of the day, regardless of the time, regardless. She was really, just there for me. Um, and I'm grateful that God put these angels into my life, even if it was just a season,
Yeah.
to really help me. There were other things that were helpful for me that were part of my kind of therapeutic healing services. Like there was a support group that I had at the Rape Crisis Center in Chapel Hill, and we all used plants. Like they gave us plants. It was a horticultural therapy support group. And I remember getting this peace lily that we pruned, that we groomed, that we nurtured. And this plant became so special to me because it was like this metaphor for me for healing and what could be possible, once I got to the other side of this really dark place in my life. So it's these things that were important for me that happened years ago, but that still were really impactful for me and being able to dig myself out of that dark place. For me, I think the missing link after going through different types of therapies was actually going back to the island where my trauma happened and reclaiming some of those dark places. So I went back to every spot where I had seen, my abuser, or, literally the place where I was assaulted, to go back and to allow myself to remember those moments that had happened, but to reclaim what was in that space. So when I went back, instead of seeing a butcher knife, I saw palm trees and the sunshine and monkeys like jumping over the fence,
Yeah.
So, instead of seeing this walkway of darkness with this guy on this bicycle, I heard the neighbor calling me, inviting me into their home to have a meal because I hadn't seen them in years,
Nice.
and so I had to go back and kind of, reclaim some of those dark places that to know that they're not dark anymore, and that it's okay to let that light back in, and what happened to me will not happen again. Um, and that love is possible, light is possible, God is here, and what happened to me is not in vain, and I can move forward. I can move forward in my healing, and I can help others move forward in their healing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the key takeaways. We talk about a mission-focused life. It's really trying to encourage people to take that first or next step in whatever situation, whatever skill sets, whatever passions they have, is to step in there and meet the needs of other people. And it sounds like that's what happened, for you. And that's what we like to all of our listeners to think about is what skills and passions has God placed into me where I can utilize those skills to to build a kingdom first, but also just to be there for people. And it sounds like you're doing an amazing job and doing that at Argos House. Tell us a little bit about your campaign, the nonviolence campaign. Is that something you're still working?
Yeah, well, I've worked, yep. So 10 plus years ago, I started working with Campaign Nonviolence. I was a seminary student in Berkeley, California. And so I started studying, my path has been a little different. Instead of moving forward on an ordination track within the Methodist Church, for which I was a part of at the time, I moved forward as a hospital chaplain, but I also moved forward as a nonviolence trainer, a teacher of peace and nonviolence and social justice. So I started working with an organization out of Oakland called Pace Bene Nonviolence Service. It's a Franciscan organization. It means peace and all good in Italian. And so I started teaching from a curriculum called Engage, Exploring Nonviolent Living. When I first started with them, I was working with young people in East Oakland, helping young people understand in the midst of gun violence that there are creative nonviolent alternatives that they can embrace. And so I work with different community centers where art and music and painting and dance, all these different things became nonviolent alternatives for these young people that could have turned to gang violence. And so that was my first kind of, start with Pace Bene and working in nonviolence. But Campaign Nonviolence, check out campaignonviolence.org. For 7+ years, I was the organizer where I organized over 7,000 peace actions around the world. Campaign Nonviolence is usually during the International Day of Peace Week, which is September 21st. And so everything from marches around peace to peace vigils to concerts to nonviolent direct actions around social justice issues. And so, the work is important, in order for us to do change. My husband always says, love is just, hold on, what does he say? Love is justice that shows up in work clothes or something.
Yeah.
Love and justice go hand in hand. If we're working in charity and love connected in the name of Christ, justice and issues that we're passionate about, it's important to speak up about those things and work the best way that we can, to be a part of justice-filled love initiatives as well. So Campaign Nonviolence is one of those where we connect the dots between war, poverty, the climate crisis, as well as racism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those are all important things. And if we do them, it seems like we always tend to go towards, we're so divided in this country, even on policies of, race and stuff like that. We need to do it in peaceful. We need to have these conversations. I think that the civil discourse in this country of not being able to have conversations about very important issues, I feel is very much hurting this country. We take sides too easily. We don't listen well enough, and we end up in battles. And I think your idea of love and peace and nonviolence is the approach, because I think if we just get rid of those other things, the things that Satan puts into our ways, then I think that we can come to a much better place if we can just do those things. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What would be a key takeaway or piece of advice you'd give our listening audience on what they can do, what can they take from your story to implement into their life, to get them moving, to get them living in the mission-focused life that God has intended for them?
Yeah. Well, I think about mission, like, I lead mission trips back to the island from which I served. So served in the Peace Corps and where my assault happened as part of my healing journey as well. But mission doesn't have to look like international development work that's Christian based. Mission can literally be in your own neighborhood. I think about this neighborhood where Argos House is. And when it's warm outside, there's an abundance of children, that just kind of flock to our doorstep, and, those children, I'm not sure if they have lots of resources in their home, and so just making sure that we have snacks and drinks, for the kids when they come by, just because they literally may be hungry. That is part of mission and the work of Christ, loving our neighbors and doing what we can to serve and to do literally what Jesus would do.
Yeah.
You know, but I would say, think about, it doesn't have to be something, I mean, it can or it can't, it doesn't have to be, but think about something that you're passionate about, an issue, a cause. It could be locally or nationally, and get involved, right? If it's volunteering, if it's sending an email, if it's making calls, if it's donating. Sometimes with mission work, it's the little things that are big things. But if you want to make mission a lifestyle, I would say commit to something that you're passionate about. Even get if you can't find like a mission buddy, that's part of the organization, connect with a friend or a family member that's like-minded, that may actually be an ally with you in those efforts, so that you're not alone, in the mission work that you're wanting to do, and you have kind of a accountability partner for serving.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So I find that can be helpful as well.
Yeah. I think that's
so I say just, yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Tim. Mhm.
I was gonna say that's a great piece of advice, because I know sometimes when we get started into something we're passionate about, we can get easily discouraged, because we might not have the success that we envision right away. So having that accountability partner, or joining in an organization that may be already successful and you just start in
Mhm.
volunteering, I think is a good piece of advice. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we don't always have to recreate or reinvent, the wheel. A lot of times there are organizations that are doing great work. But even if you want to create something, it's still important to learn from other organizations that have done this work, for much longer. For us, Thistle Farms in Nashville, Tennessee is the first survivor-made social enterprise in the country, where Reverend Becca Stevens really modeled for me, before she was even a mentor to me, like what could be possible for a mission-focused, Christian-based organization that's led by a woman minister that serves women survivors of violence and creates a bath and body social enterprise. So I knew that it was possible because I saw someone else do it.
Yeah.
And I went there to learn from them, to really engage and see what I could learn. And they were very open about sharing their wisdom and knowledge with me, so that I could have a firm foundation in starting Argos House. And other organizations will do that for you, because we know that we need each other. We can't do this work alone.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very good. Hey, where can our listeners find you, as far as I know you've written some books. I know of that. Maybe those would be some spots. Maybe you can direct some people to Facebook, other things. Just give us some ideas of where they can.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so you could just go. So Argos House, all of our products are on argoshouse.org, ARGROWSHOUSE.org. For my books, I wrote a children's book on Richard Allen, and it talks a lot about nonviolence. Richard Allen is the founder of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And then I wrote a devotional book called 101 Testimonies of Hope, that includes people's testimonies from all around the world, and also artwork and other creative ways that shares devotion. And that can be found at Kit Evans, KitEvansFord.com is my website. So yeah, you can also call the Argos House phone at 563-528-0892. But thank you all for your time, and be encouraged. The work that you desire to do and the work that you continue to do is not in vain. Sometimes it's the little things that are big things. And Jesus knows your heart. So thank you for caring and for listening to this podcast.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. It was great having you as a guest, and maybe we'll have you on again sometime. All right.
Okay. All right. Blessings, Tim. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
This has been a Mission Focused Life with Tim Olafson. Find us online at missionfocusedlife.com, as well as on Facebook at facebook.com/Mission Focused Life. You can subscribe to the video version of this show on YouTube and the audio version on Spotify, as well as anywhere you get your podcasts.